All right, let's get right into it. We're going to tackle a massive question, one that sits right at the heart of how our government works today. Who is actually in charge of all those powerful agencies that shape our daily lives? You probably learned all about the three branches of government back in school: the president, Congress, and the Supreme Court. But think about it, the rules that really affect your day to day, things like clean air standards, the safety of your medicine, or how the stock market is regulated. Where did those come from? Who's making those calls? To really get our heads around this puzzle, we've got to start with the original blueprint. That clean, simple, three-branch model of government that the Constitution lays out. And it seems so straightforward, right? Congress has its job, making the laws. The president has his, enforcing them. And the courts, they interpret what those laws mean. Everyone stays in their own lane. It's supposed to be a neat and tidy separation of powers. But, well, the world got a whole lot more complicated. And this is where the plot thickens. A whole new set of players enters the game, not because of some grand constitutional convention, but really out of pure necessity. I mean, seriously, how could a few hundred members of Congress possibly become experts on nuclear physics one day and super complex financial instruments the next? It's just not realistic. So they did the logical thing. They started creating specialized groups of experts to handle all the nitty-gritty details. And boom, here you have it. This alphabet soup of agencies is the result. We're talking about the EPA setting pollution standards, the SEC policing Wall Street, the FDA making sure our food is safe. These agencies were handed an incredible amount of power to create rules that have the same force as any law passed by Congress. So, you can see the problem, right? This creates this huge constitutional puzzle. If these powerful agencies aren't really in that original three-branch blueprint, where exactly do they fit? And more importantly, who keeps them in check? Well, there's a name for this whole setup. We call it the administrative state. It's so big and influential that people often refer to it as the unofficial fourth branch of government. It's this sprawling network of experts that the original three branches have come to depend on. Now, this quote here from legal scholar Peter Strauss, it just gets right to the heart of the matter. He points out that these agencies are doing a little bit of everything. They write rules, which sounds a lot like what a legislature does. They enforce those rules, which is an executive function. And they often settle disputes about their own rules, which is what a court does. They're blending all three powers. And that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If the whole point of separating powers was to prevent any one part of government from becoming too powerful, what happens when you have these massive agencies that do it all? Who's watching the watchers? Well, the answer is, it's not one person or group. It's more like a constant, high-stakes tug-of-war for control between the original three branches. It's a never-ending battle for accountability. So you've got each branch pulling on their end of the rope. The president tries to steer the ship by appointing the people in charge. Congress, well, they hold the power of the purse. They control the budgets and can haul agency heads in for hearings. And then you have the courts, who act as the referees, ready to blow the whistle if an agency steps out of bounds. So while all three branches are pulling, let's zoom in on the referees for a minute, the courts. Their job is absolutely critical, because they're the ones who ultimately get to decide the rules of this power game. But here's the catch. There's no single easy rulebook for them to follow. How a judge sees this whole puzzle often boils down to their personal judicial philosophy, their fundamental view of how the Constitution should work. And it really comes down to two competing ideas. On one side, you have formalism. A formalist judge looks at the rulebook and says, hey, writing rules is a legislative power, and only Congress can do that. End of story. But on the other side, you've got functionalism. A functionalist is a bit more flexible. They might say, look, as long as the whole system is in balance and Congress and the president can still check the agency, it's okay for the experts to handle the details. It just works better that way. So it's a clash between strict lanes versus overall balance. Now, this isn't just some abstract legal debate. It's happening right now. The Supreme Court's thinking on this has been shifting in a big way, and those shifts are causing major, real-world changes to how these agencies can operate. So for a long, long time, the courts had this thing called Chevron deference. Basically, if a law was kind of vague, the judges would just say, well, the experts at the agency probably know best, and they'd let the agency's decisions stand. But that's changing. Now the Supreme Court is using what's called the major questions doctrine. This basically says that for really huge society-changing decisions, think something like transforming the entire nation's energy grid, an agency can't just find some fuzzy language in an old law. No way. They need explicit, crystal-clear permission from Congress. This is a massive power shift away from the experts and back to our elected officials. So, with the legal ground literally shifting under our feet, what does the future look like? Is there a way to finally solve this fourth branch puzzle once and for all? Think about it. This whole tug of war we've been talking about, the president versus Congress versus the courts, it's all about indirect accountability, right? We vote for the president and for Congress, and then we just have to hope they do a good job of keeping these agencies in line. But some legal scholars are starting to ask, what if there's a better way? And this leads to a pretty radical and fascinating idea that's bubbling up. Instead of just having the politicians fight over who gets to control the agencies, what if we could make the agencies themselves more accountable, directly to us, the people? The basic idea here is to flip the script. Instead of a top-down power struggle, what if we built a bottom-up system? What if we made it way easier for you, for me, for regular citizens to actually have a real say when agencies are writing the rules in the first place? The thinking is, if the process itself is more democratic and fair from the start, maybe we won't need the courts to second-guess everything so much later on. It's about empowering people directly. And ultimately, that's the fundamental question we're left wrestling with. In this incredibly complex world we live in, when it comes to the rules that govern all of our lives, who should have the final say? Should it be the brilliant, highly trained experts in the agencies? Should it be the elected officials that we send to Washington? Or should we be trying to find new, creative ways to give that power directly back to the people themselves? There's no easy answer, and it's something we're all going to have to figure out together.